All right, hey everybody, welcome back to the NFL GMs pod. It's the Vikes. Joined tonight by the Falcons. Brett, I think, making his virgin voyage in the podcast here, along with Chargers. Chris is indisposed slash must have gone to bed after it took me an extra 30 to 45 minutes to actually start the pod tonight for other reasons. But anyway, Brett, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
And Matt, the background just keeps being dark and keeps being serious back there. I'm not sure if you've got a window or some kind of you know dark room stuff behind you or what's going on there.
I do have blackout curtains, but it also is already 10 o'clock. But I think the biggest portion is I have hue lights in my room, so I can change the color of my lights off my phone. I think that's the biggest portion of it.
Nice.
I
All
thought it
right.
was just the soft glow of your monitor.
Nope, and that's light.
Very nice. Anyways, so this is the second of our pre-draft power rankings pod. As anyone who watched the first half knows, we kind of went through the bottom 10. Same format here, except instead of Chris going back and forth with me, it'll be Brett and Matt, and we'll just kind of go through, who we have at the bottom of our rankings, talk about where they are on the other ranks, and we kind of expect things to get a little bit messy here with a kind of a consensus, 8 of the 10, I think, agreed of who's in the bottom. The middle class is pretty, messy is the wrong word, but it's a pretty packed middle class here in terms of between the couple cream of the crop contenders and the couple teams who are in definite rebuild. So we'll go through probably the next 10 to 12, leave the last, 10 to 12 for another cast. But again, without further ado, Brett, why don't you kick us off with what team we haven't covered yet that you have ranked the lowest?
Yeah, sure. I was listening and getting caught up on everybody's bottom 10, and I think the Dolphins were a team that I had ranked at 27th, which is not. Did anybody have them in their bottom 10? Or would I be the standalone there?
No, I think I had him in that next group of 10 or so.
And I
Yeah,
guess
the next
I'm
10 for me, but they're a little bit higher up off that 10.
and I guess, looking at their team in my other window here, it was, no points coming from tight end. Wide receiver is solid. Running back is solid, but just looking at the defense, I just don't like much of anything there. I don't think Jordan Phillips is going to put up as many points as he did last year. Linebacker is pretty soft outside of Quinn. Cornerback, he's only rostering a single cornerback. Not that he can't add that during the season, but when it's also not one of our most active owners, I'm
Mm-hmm.
not exactly expect. I mean, if he hasn't added corners in free agency yet, I don't know what exactly he's waiting for. So, I mean, there are some definite spots on the roster that are strong, and those will carry him to some wins. But I don't necessarily feel like the time and effort's going to get put in to fill in some of the holes.
Yeah, it's an odd roster. My biggest thing is on Jordan Phillips. Knowing how Cliff Kingsbury likes to play football, those defensive ends are going to see a lot of snaps because they're going to be a very fast offense. So it may, if that was any team but Arizona, I'd be a bit more concerned about him maybe not producing. But I think just by volume of actual plays they're going to end up running, he may still get close to that number, and then he just has to hope that Randy Gregory isn't suspended forever, and then maybe he picks up a defensive end in the draft, and it softens that position a little bit for him. I think the biggest portion, or why I had them ranked higher, was cornerback does not matter. He can find cornerbacks eventually. Um, he's got the harder positions on defense outside of defensive end that he's reasonably okay at. Not everybody in the league is going to have 3 or 4 starters at these IDP positions. So this guy's I think he's ahead of the curve with having 2 fairly solid defensive tackles. A defensive end I think is still going to score okay, and then a couple of linebackers, and then he'll have his draft picks to basically ignore the offensive side of things and just fill in on the defense. Um, but I definitely don't think this is a team that is playoff bound. I mean, they might be just because of how weak their division is, but it's not a team that I think is going to be looking at drafting at the same position they did this year and next year.
Or, I mean, and they have 103 and 203, and I could see an easy argument to put Jags, Ravens, Rams, Titans above them. I think they're all kind of clustered together as not the truly terrible, but still missing major pieces.
Yeah, they're if you build their team in Madden, the position, like you'll see, like you'll have a couple of A's and B's across the board, but when you actually look at the position specific grade, it's like a D because there's no depth.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I have these guys more towards the middle of the pack. I think, like you said, there are some positions that are really strong, like running back. I think he's got good receiver depth. I've been a fan of Ed Oliver for a while, so I like him there. And I need to look at the Minnesota depth chart, but I think with Linval Joseph gone, Johnson's a starter there, so I think he's okay there. Obviously, D and the linebacker need some help. Howard should get some more play if he can stay healthy down in Miami, and then solid set of safety. So, again, I didn't take per se picks into account here, but he's got the third pick. So, again, shockingly, I've been on him for most of the offseason trying to get that because I'm a freaking fiend.
It only took you 6 weeks to get mine.
I know. Seriously, almost had to go Rumpelstiltskin to get that. We're talking tight end, we're talking corner, and we're talking D end that he has to add to really, fill all the holes. But if at 3 he goes quarterback, he takes care of his Ben problem. If he goes running back, that's a very solid crew there. He could trade down and, add the tight end through that trade. He's got avenues to take care of what he needs to take care of. So I think he's probably a little bit closer to the wild card because it's the AFC. But I see, like I said, I've got him in that next 10, but I don't have him as, bottom 10. But I see how you could get there.
Well, and it'll be interesting to see which direction he goes with Ingram on a 1-year contract, Keenan Allen on a 1-year contract. And I guess part of me is expecting him to ship off some of those assets. And I guess I'm baking that in when it's not necessarily a foregone conclusion.
Because I'm thinking about this now. So, in terms of wild cards for the AFC, and I'm getting way ahead of myself here, but that's what happens all the time. Probably both are likely going to the AFC North because, Broncos, Pats, Titans, probably Jags, maybe Texans, and Ravens are definitely not going after it.
Right.
That next tier includes the Dolphins, but, if they don't sell everything off, they're in that wild card conversation. Because the AFC is the North is gonna just eat itself, kind of like the NFC North does.
Yeah, it's going to be so difficult for you to walk to the. You don't even have to worry about it.
So again, if he can sneak ahead of the Bills, he could find himself in that contention for that 6th seed. So.
Well, and I don't love the Bills. I mean, that division is weak. And yeah, I do have Bengals, Steelers, Browns all in.
Yeah. I think, personally, it's going to be more than likely Browns, Bengals. One of those two is obviously going to win the division, I think. The other one will be a wild card. And then I think it's almost just as likely for the Dolphins to win their division as they are to make a wild card. Just because I think the Raiders are better than pretty much every team in that division except for maybe Jets. The AFC South, I don't think any of those teams are good except for the Colts. And then it's just like we have 2 effectively dead divisions in the AFC.
That's such a tough conference to play in.
Yeah, it's so hard. Life is rough.
It's true. Speaking of, tough life, let's talk about Matt's lowest team on his rankings here. Matt, who do you have next?
I have the Bills, which I like the move they've made to replace Baker with Dak. I don't remember exactly when that was, but that's a good move either way. I don't like his running backs. And outside of this is more of a situation of where it's he's got really good players, but lacking of depth, and I think it actually matters in this situation because I don't find his running backs to be anything to write home about. I don't think that any of those guys are going to really press for breaking over 100 points this season. He's got 2 wide receivers, and that's honestly, I think about it. I don't think Alan Lazard's going to do anything this year when you've got a studded wide receiver class coming out, and the Packers are almost for sure going to draft a couple guys, I imagine. Then you've got 800-year-old Jason Witten playing for the Raiders now, and Blake Jarwin, who we think might be good. And then it's just he's got guys, but they're guys that I don't think are going to produce well this year, and or there's just like he's got a bajillion safeties, and he's going to start. I think the max start you can have is 2 or 3, I think, which just sets him back even more. So he's got all of this invested into positions like that when he's got 2 guys that might score at defensive end, but has 5 starting caliber safeties. So he either needs to make moves or he just needs to he just needs to make moves.
No, you're absolutely right about the safeties. Actually, just due to the depth I have, that is one of the stronger safety units in the league.
It for sure is.
Yeah.
If that, is a big thing. I'm a little bit higher on Lazard than you are just because any rookie that comes in is going to need some time. So it's a 1-year deal. I think, you're going to get production. I don't think you're going to get, 1,000 yards and 6 touchdowns production, but I could see 750 and 4 or something like that, enough to.
I mean, it depends on who they draft too.
Yeah. Again, so
well, that's part of my issue there is you're depending on this guy to be effectively a spot starter, but you don't have any else there to really spot those starts with.
No, I understand, but so it's more of and this is going to sound slightly hypocritical coming from me considering the sheer amount of rookie picks I have, but what are you counting on a rookie receiver to get you?
More spot start, more than a spot. Well, I guess it would depend on where you draft them personally. Like if you're looking at, in your case, you've got a bajillion top 10 picks. Like if I'm drafting a wide receiver with one of those picks, I expect them to be a starter. I expect them to be like AJ Brown this past season or like that type of thing where there's somebody that they're going to score points for you. They're not going to be like necessarily huge, but they're a guy you can depend on filling a hole in your lineup week to week, which is just...
So it's draft week. So let's get hypothetical. Say Justin Jefferson goes to goes to Green Bay.
Mm-hmm.
Slot him in there opposite Devontae Adams, a little bit more of a cross the middle option than Adams is. Rodgers is usually a 4,000 yard pace guy.
Mm-hmm.
To give 1,200 of that to Adams, that's still 2,800 yards that needs to go to people. Do you really expect a rookie to get over 800? So he's still got 2,000 to go across a couple of other spots. So again, I'm talking. I was bidding up Lazard, so I believe in him. So I'll be transparent there. Jarwin has shown enough that I think he's worth a shot at tight end. Like you said, it's just that running back it's bad, and outside of moving safeties, he doesn't really have ammo to fix it. So, again, I see him kind of in the middle class here. He's my next 10, but maybe a little higher up than others. But I think, the strengths are strengths, but he doesn't have the ammo to fix the weaknesses.
But in that division, I still feel like he is going to be competitive just because, I mean, I can see the argument for Dolphins being competitive, but Jets and Bills aren't strong. Both of them are going to compete with each other. So one of these teams is a bottom half, maybe mid-tier team in the league is going to win the division.
Mm-hmm. And that's kind of what gets me is I've tried I very much have looked at these teams and tried to differentiate or ignore who are going to be in the playoffs when ranking them because one of these teams out of this division is going to make the playoffs. And I don't think any of these teams in this division are in the top half of the league in actual talent.
All right, moving. My turn to pick a team. So the lowest ranked team I have left, and this is the only division we haven't talked about yet. So I'm happy to break the seal on the last division, and of course it's the infamous NFC North, the Detroit Lions. So reason I've got them as low as I do, and I think it's pretty clear to those who look at the team. Until Jameis finds a home, he really has no path to a starting quarterback, and Jameis is probably taking a backup job at this point. Like literally, it would have to be San Diego or Miami pass on everybody, and Miami says, okay, we'll bring back Tampa 2019 or 2018 and see how that works. But with Carson being out for the better part of the year, maybe not the better part of the year, but better part of training camp. He may not be ready for the start of the season. No starting quarterback. Traquan getting shifted down with Sanders coming to town. There's too many question marks on offense for me. I think it's a good, not great defense. He's definitely taken the pass rusher approach that Goose loves to make famous to that next level, but I don't think it's going to be enough to make up for sort of the gap he has on offense. He's basically got Drake, in my opinion, Drake, Juju, and question marks.
Yeah, I mean, pretty much
No
agree
Chris
across
Carson
the
love,
board.
huh?
I like Chris Carson, so let me say that much. Like I came into last year thinking he's going to get pipped by Penny, and it didn't happen. So the fact he was able to hold him off, and Penny's that first round back, and Penny may not be making it back until week 6 this year. I think Carson's got a chance to hang on to the job. I just am waiting to see, Carroll and everyone came out and said we're addressing the position. Just need to see how they're addressing it. Is it addressing it in the first 2 days? Then I think Carson's in trouble. If it's addressing it on day 3, and I think there's a very good amount of backs that could make sense for the Seahawks in that range, he's probably fine. But it's just there's 4 or 5 backs that are in that position this year, and everyone knows who they are. So it's a question of, do you think that somebody who's not going to be in training camp can hold off somebody who's a top 100 pick?
Right. I had Lions a little higher. I mean, defensive end is a very big hole, but I feel like he has some really solid linebacker depth that is going to keep him competitive in a lot of weeks, where he's going to end up winning enough games. He's not going to. I wouldn't expect him to really be in the wild card hunt in the NFC with as tight as it is, but I think he's going to be pretty middle of the road.
I mean, dropping a donut at defensive end.
Yeah, it's bad. I mean, there's a lot of teams that are going to drop donuts at positions, whether it's tight end, whether it's running back. I mean, there are teams that are going to drop zeros.
See, that's the thing, though. Like, you can drop a 0 at tight end, I think, just because, one, there's so few of them that are actually scoring high, and 2, you're only starting 1. That it's a position that, I understand if it gets somewhat overlooked. Defensive end is a position where you are starting 2 every single week. And
and a 0 from quarterback too.
Yeah, and it's just, it makes things hard. And I know I took my laps or my wax or lashes or whatever last pod about 14 million for 2 separate defensive ends, but sometimes people are gonna have to go out and pay that at some point when
gotta spend money somewhere.
Yeah, it's it's a position you have to have, people. If you don't have it, you're not going to be a good team. That's really is one of the separating points I have for between okay, good, and then great teams.
Nice. All right, Brett, back to you.
Yeah, Saints would be the team that's lowest on my pick. I think you guys talked about
We
them.
did them last time, yeah.
Yeah, so I don't really have to go into it, but I have them 22nd on my rankings.
All right. Who do you have above them?
Above them, I've got the Raiders.
They were not discussed last time. And
No,
I think
we have
we're in that. We're in that middle pack.
Oh yeah, I mean the middle is so this is the big tier of teams that aren't bad. They're not terrible, but I don't feel like they're competitive for those wild card spots either. So it's a big lump of teams there. But I mean, I had them as sneakily kind of good. It's a fairly deep roster, but I don't feel like they've really got any players that are really going to, that are going to put up enough points to really make a difference. I mean, couple good linebackers. They've got Daniel Hunter, which is great, but I don't love the wide receivers. I think most of them are going to decline this year off their point totals from last year. Same with running back position. I feel like Peterson's not going to score as many points this year. Latavius Murray, I think Kamara's going to be healthier, so I think he's going to see a decline. So I see a bunch of players on their roster that I feel like have a downward trend in their point total, and they weren't a good team last year. So that's where I've got them.
No,
That's
it's a good call, and I mean, yeah, if you look at the point totals, receiver looks better than it probably is. Um, Running back, he's got enough nice names to be able to pull what he needs to production wise there. Lock being the full time starter should give him better quarterback. It's one of those really interesting card team. If you're not, and the defense is still the shell that I talked about, it's a top 10 team. So again, this is something, again, a common theme we're going to have for all these teams, but
And he's got the 107. I feel like there's the buildings of a good team here.
Yeah.
I don't know that it's here now, but he's got 107, 207. He's got some good pieces.
Yeah, I think he's like, you see all these big contracts on his roster on 1-year deals. I think he just went in 1 year too early. I think if he had just held back another year, took that 7th pick, sucked again, got another top 10 pick, he's not losing anybody that he couldn't just extend. Like, he can extend, carry on, and it's going to be a relatively okay contract, one would think, depending on how the whole 5th round option goes now. I don't have any first round players, so I don't have to worry about it.
But look at the money. Look at the players that he spent that money on. Larry Fitzgerald.
Darren
He spent
Fells.
16 million of that as Darren
year,
Fells. Like, how many points? Like, are those players really going to increase his potential points that much?
Compared to last year, yeah, I think this moves this from like a 105 to 110 team to like that middle of the, like, there's really not that much difference between the teams picking at 107, 108 and the teams picking at like 116, 118. Like, it's just a few wins here and there, and especially in the AFC where there's so many of these teams that are just going to be stankers. Like, I really think the majority, like, it's going to be a knife's edge difference, just a single loss here or there, because so many teams are going to be losing games, and it's going to be, I don't think we're going to have like a bunch of 3 and whatever teams. I think we're going to have like a huge block of like 5 and 6 win teams that are just going to be like stuck there. And that's less that I think. Like, I don't know. This team, it's just with the conference, it's weird. It looks like a good team on paper, and he gets to play the Broncos twice, so he gets 2 wins there. So it's a tough way to go. And I think, like, just from a team building perspective, personally, I think he would have been better placed to save on spending. But I appreciate him taking out all of these massive free agents from everyone else's hands, because I did not have the money to sign them.
So it's going to be interesting here. So I'm looking at his schedule. He's obviously in the West, so I think he's probably got 2 wins from Broncos. Say he splits with Kansas City. That's 3 wins right there. He also gets Jacksonville, Houston, Tennessee, Detroit. I mean, you see a path to 7 or 8 wins with this team. So, again,
Hey, 7 wins might be enough for a wild card.
8-win team.
Yeah, like, one extra win over what we're expecting here. It's 9 wins. That may be the 6th wild card. Like, it's.
Oh, but I mean, we've only got 3-4 more teams, maybe 5, where we begin to talk about all of the teams that are seriously competing for wild card spots.
Yeah.
All right. So, well, breaking news here that we have to cover because we are live. The Redskins have made a trade. Derrick Henry has finally moved off of the Redskins to the Bears for Matt Milano, the 124 and a 127. So Redskins pick up a linebacker in 2 picks. late in the first, and the Bears get Derrick Henry. Um, shit.
That's not a very Bearsy move, and I don't know why Reds.
Oh, he loves
making
Derrick
that
Henry.
move. Well, yeah, I know he loves Derrick
makes
Henry,
so much
but he
sense.
hates players that have like popular names.
He's I mean, he wants to win this year. And
So
he's putting together a
Fucking good luck
roster that he
with
can
that.
do that with. So
This,
Yeah,
I mean,
I
he
mean-
does keep getting handouts.
it makes perfect sense for the Bears. He trades what, you know. So I have laid out who I think is going to be where in the first, and you're probably into the IDP slash fourth quarterback slash eighth running back slash receiver range
Mhm.
at that point. Um, so you're probably talking two IDP guys plus Matt Milano for Derrick Henry. You take Henry every time there. So I get it. Plus he's less than 10 million. That's exactly the Goose archetype. It's a controllable asset that could be extended and still be a reasonable price.
And hey, that
I mean-
also makes up for him having Ryan Tannehill at quarterback, as he's getting all of the points that Tannehill isn't scoring back in his running back.
can they have a bye week in like week 14, 15, something like that? Can we just push the Titans bye week a little later? All I'm getting is that basically every other owner in the league really wants Bears to finally pull it home and win the Super Bowl.
Finally,
He did. He won. I think
He won the
first.
first-
Oh,
year.
it's they win the okay. Well, I wasn't there, so that hardly counts. But the general point still stands.
All right. Anyways, another player I was barking after that didn't get, but that's no big deal. So going back to it, so we just went through the Raiders. Matt, I think it's your turn.
I actually fucking lost my rankings because I used that
You're
same
so
notepad.
upset.
Yeah, I know. I used that same notepad to take down an order for Taco Bell and left it in the car. Real important stuff right there. After the Raiders, I don't think Raiders are that bad. I'd probably have to go. We touched Panthers yet? I don't think we
Oh.
have we?
No, you can't. Definitely haven't touched Panthers yet.
It's just another one of those teams where, like we've said this a bajillion times. This portion of the league is just a mess.
I've got Panthers a lot higher than that.
I don't think he's a bad team. I just think it's one of the issues where like you run into that wall of no depth, which I also preached having studs is really good, but also not having depth
So
behind
what you
those
want,
studs.
what you want,
What you want is
stud
you want
players
the top 10 at the position
and
and
you
a
want
bunch
really
of depth.
good depth. Yeah. So what you want is a roster that would be great in a 12-team IDP. That's what you're after.
Speaking from experience, having a couple of stud players on especially IDP lends you to getting just boned when they don't show up, which that's exactly what I see from his defensive ends. Is he's got three guys that are going to show up. Most weeks he'll get two of them, and then there's going to be a week where two of them disappear, and he's got one of them that's producing, and he loses the week because he just runs out of points from one or two guys having off weeks.
So I think he's certainly. I mean, the NFC North is tough, and we're jumping way ahead as far as I'm concerned. But he's got a team that is going to be competitive, definitely competitive for a wild card. And, and somebody is going to get not. I mean, it's either somebody in the North is going to get left behind, or Panthers is going to get left. I mean, I could get left behind, but he's got a team that can beat you any given week. He could beat anybody in any week.
Yeah, if he
And a lot
hits
of people
on,
don't have
if
that.
all of his players hit off, yeah, he can beat anyone.
But he's
if
got players
a
that
couple
can do
guys miss, anyone can beat him is my thing. And I don't think it's a bad team. Just like talent-wise, I think he'll probably be fighting for a wild card, but talent-wise, I don't think the team is necessarily that good.
So I
Just
had this as a
because.
top 10 team. So
Woo!
Yeah, same.
again, my middle class extends up to 6.
Mm-hmm.
Here, so that's why I can say they're in that middle, but also a top 10 team. Agree, a lot of studs and a lot of not studs. Question is, does he make a move for depth? But you know, he's got so it's his division, which again, outside of Falcons being really tough and Saints probably be on the same tier as him, with Buccaneers being 2 free wins. He's also got the West, and then I think it's the AFC South. So it's going to be tough for him not to get 9 or 10 wins.
Oh yeah, like this is a team that I definitely think is going to be fighting for a wild card. I just, again, the talent-wise aspect. I guess I'm doing my rankings of it slightly different in the sense that I'm not looking at like these teams are playoff bound and these teams are contenders, and more or less like on a week-to-week basis, who I think is like the scariest. And I think it's a lot easier to take a team that has good depth and then add a couple studs using picks and maybe condensing some of that depth than it is to take a stud and turn that into reasonable depth.
Fair.
I feel like there's some teams that I can ping as being worse than that pretty easily. That
Oh, yeah,
I don't
I
feel
mean-
like they have studs or depth, but
Usually a good mix of the both is what you're going for. Obviously not like you have a stud at every position and then you have the correlated depth with it. It's just
Right.
like there's some positions like tight end. If you get a stud, great. You don't really care about depth at tight end.
All right, so I'm up again, and I'm going back out west, and this is going to be one of those probably surprises in how the mighty have fallen. I'm thinking the Cardinals. As my next
that's who I
look.
had next to.
Matt and I are Niners fans, so love Jimmy, but not so much for fantasy. Running back room is pretty vacant, except for third stringers. Nuke Edelman and maybe Goodwin or Wilson do something. No tight end. Chris Jones at D tackle. Justin Houston at D end. A decent linebacker core with Littleton on an insane contract, and then a solid secondary. So better than the back seven is looking okay of the defense, but the front four and then the offense outside of a few bright spots just isn't there. So unless he's able to do something to add it back, I just don't see it.
Yeah, I think my brain kind of just like blocked out Cardinals existing after that DeMarcus Lawrence trade. This team is worse than the Panthers by a lot, but
Yes, that's who I had next to, and then you look at some of the players that he is getting points from. Where, is Edelman without Brady at his age? Like, is he really? He's what, 33 now? Going to be 34 before the season starts, and he just lost Brady.
Yeah.
So, it is really hard for me to imagine he comes anywhere close to. I mean, like, and 80% of that point total and scoring 200 points is fine, but he doesn't have any depth. And with Edelman, you don't get that many boom games either, which is what's really going to help you in the best ball league. And then he has nothing at defensive for his second defensive end.
and
yeah,
he's
it's-
paying DeAndre Hopkins $30 million.
Right. Well, and DeAndre Hopkins, people are concerned about. I mean, it's a little overblown because he's amazing, but first year in a new system and whether it's going to take him time to adjust and so on and so forth. So that's just a lot of money. Yeah, I don't love it.
Holy shit, that's a fucking lot of money for now.
But yeah, all right. So did the Cardinals. So back to you, Brett. Who do you have next?
Next up for me is the Chiefs.
I love your rankings, man.
You hate my division.
I do, and because I hate your division, I also hate you for being in it.
Oh, cry me a river.
I'll buy you another beer.
Prior to this season, I would have rather had Bucks than Broncos. So
I mean, Watson is great. Gurley is scary, but should produce this year. He's got a good wide receiving. I mean, at least duo with AJ Brown and Evans. And then after that, I feel like we just kind of fall off a cliff because he's got nothing. I mean, Njoku hasn't done anything in Cleveland so far and just got replaced and is on a terribly expensive contract now. Defensive tackle, he's gonna, try and scrape together, you know, 7, 8 points a game. He's got nothing really at defensive end. His linebackers are really weak. His secondary is okay, but there's just nothing really to write home about other than AJ Brown and Mike Evans.
Yep.
And Watson. But there's a couple stars and a lot of scrubs. So
This is
it's a
a
weak
team.
division, so he's going to scrape together more wins and hurt his pick by being in a weak division where he can win 3 or 4 games. But I don't think the team is very good. No offense to Nate, one of our new owners, because Anthony's a quitter.
No, this was Steve. Anthony's the
Oh, you're right.
Jets.
This was Steve. Yeah, sorry. That's
Um,
the bourbon talking.
I don't know. This is a team that if he has a quick turnaround, he's fine. But AJ Brown's gonna get expensive. Mike Evans is already expensive. Todd Gurley, when he needs a new contract, is probably gonna be expensive, or he's just gonna be dead. Deshaun Watson is already kind of expensive. I mean, you're buoyed by the fact you're not paying Teddy Bridgewater or Taysom Hill 32+ million. But at the same time, it's 25+ million to a quarterback on a team that isn't going to be doing a whole lot other than fighting with the other mid-tier teams in the league. There's a lot of oddities to the team. And I think he is kind of unfortunate to be left with the hand that he was dealt by Steve. But there also are a few like he made that Mike Evans trade. Like the new owner made the Mike Evans trade, which to me doesn't make sense.
Right. I mean, it's decision time. There's no point being stuck in the middle.
Yeah. Like I reached out to him immediately afterwards, seeing like if he was just trying to go all in on guys he knows are going to produce now and see if he wanted to do some sort of AJ Brown for Amari Cooper swap. And it seemed to be like he's of the mindset that if he can get his offense right, he can take it to us, which I don't know with that IDP. Maybe he's just planning on going full IDP in the draft now in response, but even then, hole at tight ends, kind of shitty, but not terrible. But like nothing at defensive end except for Michael Brockers, who I don't know what his position is at this point in Los Angeles with how much changes they're going through. Defensive tackle is a meh role to have guys that are producing well at. Linebacker is a bunch of meh. He's got backups. I think his best linebacker by points last season is the backup this season, isn't he? David Mayo. Yeah, it's a rough position to be in there, but he's got a 206-point cornerback, so that's kind of neat.
You guys kind of hit the points here, so I don't feel like I need to elaborate too much.
Oh, I think we're going pretty long
You
anyway.
mentioned Todd Gurley yet, so the hate truly is real. But
I mean, he's going to score points this year, I think.
Yeah.
But
he'll just fall off a cliff in the next 2 once the arthritis really kicks in.
And then he's still going to be stuck on the hook for $20 million.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if you're that team, do you really think you have enough to compete? I mean, he may have enough to get into the playoffs in the AFC. It's weak, but you certainly don't have enough to win it all. So, sell Gurley and get what you can for him for a team that's competitive and, push
he
everything
bought
back
Gurley
a couple of years.
first. So that's the other thing. He doesn't control his first round pick at this point.
Right.
Which I think he traded in that Evans trade, didn't he?
No, he traded in the Gurley trade.
The Gurley. Oh, even worse. My man. What are you doing?
So this should be fun, but either way. Okay. Good call there. Let's see if we can get Matt to agree with us on one of these.
You're muted.
It said, I believe we've already covered everybody but me in the Wests, correct?
Yeah, you're up next.
I honestly, this is just a mess here. We've covered pretty much everybody I think is actually bad.
I'll tell you what, you look and I'll do my next one. You got the next thing here. So I'm taking it to the AFC South. And and like I said, this at this point, everyone's like a point or two apart in my rankings. I kind of went through how to do my system last time, and everyone's like 1 or 2 points here or there, so everything can change quickly. I've got Houston at this point.
Wow.
So when I look at this team, quarterback, he did a lot of maneuvering last year to go from Russell Wilson and that massive contract to Josh Allen, and now Andrew Luck is a fingers crossed maybe he comes back and joins the Patriots. Um, the Melvin Gordon signing in Denver shot Royce Freeman's value, so he doesn't have a running back. Um, Robinson and Shepard. I don't think anybody really needs or should be trusting Sterling Shepard this year. I don't know if anyone has a peg on his value, but that's neither here nor there. Lucked out with Hurst going to Atlanta. Um, D tackle is a bit of a mess. D end is a bit of a mess. His Allen, so Jonathan Allen and Dunlap. Um, I'm dubious what that defense looks like in Washington once they add Chase Young. What that's going to do to John Allen or where he kind of shifts to. Um, Campbell and Roquan and Jared Davis, so the linebacking core is solid, but then the back four, I think, still has some work to do. So I think there's some good pieces, but I think the holes are big enough that this is not a team that's going to be an AFC contender for a playoff spot.
And I find it funny that you think that, only because that means that you have Colts penciled in, or penciled in as winning the South, and I kind of find that hard to believe because put me on the camp of people that don't think that he's going to have a quarterback. So it's and he's got a lot of holes on his roster too. So I think I had Texans ranked above the Colts by one spot, a little further up the rankings, because I don't have confidence that Colts is going to be able to keep a stranglehold on that division this year.
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty much the same. I think if you look past just the QB position, I think Texans has a bit more talent across the board than Colts does, just because like he's got starting at linebacker, he's got 3 starters. Colts has 2. He's got 2 starters. Like he's got 2 linebackers on his roster that are rostered by an NFL team. Defensive ends good if not great if they stay healthy / don't get traded.
Which they didn't do last year.
Yeah, I mean, well, D Ford is apparently in Lombardi, so there's no actual credence to it. But the words came out of someone's mouth that D Ford is available for trade in San Francisco. I don't buy it, but I do buy into the fact that D Ford probably won't play more than 50-60% of snaps this year, just because he doesn't really need to.
And Colts could hit on his running backs, but he's got Geis and David Johnson, who are now both made of glass. Yeah. So how many games does he get out of them? So, I mean, if both of those guys hit and produce this year, then, his team will be looking pretty good. But I feel like Colts and Texans are really going to fight it out up until the last week.
Colts
and their head-to-head matchups are going to dictate who wins that division.
Colts needs a lot of players to break the right way for him, while Texans just needs a few players to not break the wrong way, is how I look at it. Like Colts needs players to step up from their past scoring and just become better, while Texans needs his players to not regress too much.
Yeah, I mean, Texans has a much better. I mean, with Dunlap and John Allen at defensive end, he's at least got 2 reliable guys at defensive end. His linebackers are pretty solid with Devondre Campbell and Roquan Smith starting most weeks. Sean Williams at safety is going to put up points more weeks than not.
And Texans has 2 QBs more likely to play 6 games than Colts does. So,
and look, I'm not a Trubisky hater. I think that they brought Foles in to compete, but I think that's kind of a messed up organization. And if probably Pace and Nagy are coaching for their jobs, I I think Trubisky's going to start over Foles.
Well, and even if he starts, though, he's going to be shit. So
I just can't see them. If Trubisky starts the first 2 games and just looks like normal, shitty Mitch Trubisky, that city is going to fucking demand Nick Foles by fire and blood.
And then Nick Foles is going to start 4 or 5 games and then get hurt.
Yeah.
And Trubisky will get to come back in.
Like, Trubisky's going to get benched in the first 3 games. I don't see a world in which he doesn't, unless he becomes God mode Mitch Trubisky.
Well, and we're assuming he wins the battle in camp, too.
Yeah, like I don't see a world where Mitchell Trubisky is something you feel confident about starting at quarterback for your team, even in fantasy football.
I'm thinking back to those old promos. In a world where Mitchell Trubisky is a competent running quarterback.
I mean,
in a world where Nick Foles is taking over in Chicago. In a world where Big Dick Nick is once again a Super Bowl quarterback. Anyways, I'm getting ahead of myself. All right, so fair enough. Maybe they're a little bit closer between Indy and Houston than I have given them credit for, but you know, I'll take that hit. But I personally think, in terms of how I've broken it down, that while quarterback is probably further apart than I'm giving it credit for, I think the other positions kind of slide more in Indy's favor. Plus, we talk about, okay, maybe DJ is made of glass, maybe Geis is an issue. There's options on Indy where there's not on Houston. So, again, take that as it is. But that's what I have next. Matt, you come up with anybody?
I have the Jets. And it's another one of those teams where they're probably going to win their division, but it's because their division is filled with corpses and not because they're overly good.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, to this really comes down to me. He just doesn't have, like, his good players aren't guys that are holding like their own in their own actual NFL offenses. Like, Tevin Coleman is a good running back, but he's on the Niners, so he's not going to be a guy that's going to be getting 20 carries every game. Damian Williams probably won't even be considered close to the guy in Kansas City this year. Marquise Brown we're not sure if he's going to be able to sustain playing 16 games a season effectively. Brandon Cooks is definitely not playing 16 games a season, and Evan Ingram is in trade talks. He may not even be on the Giants. He may end up in San Francisco being the second tight end, third wide receiver type guy. It's a lot of the guys that he has that produced for him last year look like they're in worse positions, if not totally different positions this year, which isn't really Anthony's fault, but it's not good for talent.
Brett, what do you think?
I have them slated in to win the division over the Bills too. And I mean, there are some bright spots. I think that, generally I feel like his receivers are pretty good for best ball. I mean, it would be nice if he had at least a consistent floor guy to be able to rely on points from. But he does have the booms there with Brown, Cooks, and Brown. I mean, running back, he's got a lot of options. I mean, it kind of depends on what. I think a lot of it is going to hinge on what the Rams do in the draft. If the Rams go into the season with Henderson and Brown at running back and don't take somebody on day 2, and I don't really think they have the draft capital to consider doing that, then Brown's going to improve on his point total. He's going to get short yardage, and I feel like he'll have some scoring weeks. His linebackers are pretty solid. It would help if Golden got picked up somewhere, but I mean, there's not a lot to love, and I don't think that he has much in the way of 4th round picks. So there's not really anywhere to go for help. But it's a weak division. I had him penciled in 15th, 16th, something like that, and probably winning the division, but not because he's a good team.
things could get really bad for Anthony very quickly at running back because Breda probably gets traded during the draft for a mid to late pick. Tevin Coleman could get cut if the Niners end up moving back from one of their firsts and getting a reasonable second and being able to grab a Taylor or an Akers or a Dobbins. Like if they grab one of those top running backs, Coleman's probably gone. It's because
Damian Williams, if the
he
Chiefs
frees
take
up so much.
somebody, I mean,
it's
the draft could be really bad for his running back group.
yeah.
But the draft
So, yeah,
is really scary for anybody that relies on running backs. I mean, it's terrifying.
So a lot hinges on the draft for this team. I agree with that completely. That said, like, let's back up a second here. He's got until we figure out who's Miami going to at 5. He's got 2 starting quarterbacks, which is a nice thing to have. Breda's probably getting traded, but he wants to be traded to a position where he has a chance to contribute more. So I don't think anyone's going to acquire him who's not planning to give him 150 to 200 touches. Brown, again, I think is probably – point is, if I think both the 49ers have bigger needs and the Chiefs kind of fall in that spot where they're not going to use a high enough pick to put Damian Williams on the bench.
He'll have a role for sure.
So it's one of those things where they've got to re-sign or trade Chris Jones here because they franchised him. I don't think he signed his tender. So they very well could be at the back of the first round and saying, all right, we're going to have to trade Chris Jones. Blacklock, come on down. Then you get to the second round and there's other positions of need they have there. So, and again, at pick 64, are any of the big 4, big 5 running backs still going to be on the board? So
Probably.
And if they aren't, I don't know if it will take one of the big 4 or 5 to really push a Damian Williams out of the rotation.
But I mean, it's not like he put up huge points last year. I mean, as long as Damian Williams can rely on getting 50% of the touches, it's not worthless at $5.2 million in a best ball league.
yeah, he was averaging 10 a week basically. So, running back 2 numbers. So if he's able to get running back 2 numbers, and then someone between Breda, Coleman, Juszczyk, and Brown is able to step up every once in a while and help for some other weeks, he's fine at running back because you only have to start 1. He's got best ball receivers in Brown, and Cooks. Even
That
if
is shallow
I do love the fact that everyone's forgetting about Jack Doyle because I'm going after him in all of my leagues because of it. That team wants to throw to the tight end, and Ebron's gone. So unless somehow they bring in Ingram or another big receiving threat tight end, Doyle's going to get fed. So I think
He's on the field.
That's fine. Look, outside, I think DN's the big hole here, but I think the offense is better than people are giving credit for. I think defense is better than people are giving it credit for. I think DN's an issue, but I have this as another top 10 team. But again, because they're going to win the division and should end enough points to.
Does winning the division make them a top 10 team?
This could be the number 2 seed.
Oh God!
Oh, what?
I mean, okay, I see where Mike's coming from. If he thinks the Bengals and the Browns and the Steelers all beat the ever-living shit out of each other for a bunch of losses. Like, if they split all their games, that's 3 losses apiece, and then they drop 1 out of division, that's probably not a top 2 team.
But Mike, didn't you like the Bills? No, you hated the Bills.
I think the Bills are a middle of the road team. So say they split with the Bills, they probably, and you know what, for argument's sake, they split with the Dolphins. But they sweep the Patriots, so it's a 4-2 in division. They also have they have the Raiders, they have the Steelers, they have the Ravens. They're going to lose probably the Bengals and Browns. They have the Redskins.
Oh, so they have to play the AFC North, which is rough.
Yeah, they have the AFC North, which again is rough for some of the. So I think this is a 10 or 11 win team. And I think 11 wins could get you the number 2 seed in the AFC this year. I think
Again,
Again,
petition to
I
switch
just- I just-
switch conferences.
I just see the AFC North beating the shit out of each other. Like Bengals and Browns are just two very good teams. The
But you
Steelers are
only
good
gave
enough
him
to
one more
compete.
win you gave him a 4-2 division record. So even if the other AFC North teams beat the shit out of each other and split all their games and go 3-3, it's only one win that you're taking away from them.
Well, I'm going 4-2 to go conservative to say conservatively, can I get him to 10 wins? And I think conservatively, I can get him there.
Yeah, I
'Cause-
I had them ranked as my 15th team. The Jets.
So again, you could see wins against Bills, Dolphins, Pats, Raiders, Steelers.
How do you get over the defense with the Jets being just pretty weak across the board?
Cowboys.
Because they're really not that weak at defense. Like defensive tackle's fine.
Other
They
than
have a-
linebacker. I mean, Hargrave's fine.
Cornerbacks don't matter.
No, I know. His defensive end, he's got to start too. He's got Barnett, who's
Yeah,
never
like
performed.
that is the biggest issue. Is
That's a
defensive
huge
end.
issue.
But like, how many other teams are also staring down the barrel of having
A
defensive
lot of teams
end
can
issues?
a lot of teams at least have one guy that they
Like
can
he's
rely on.
got
to get
one guy between Barnett, Phillips, and Harris Robertson. I think at least they can get one guy a week from those three. There's some teams that may not get one guy a week.
All right. Well, we're right about that point. So, Brett, finish us off. Who's the last team we're going to be covering tonight?
Did you guys cover the Redskins last time?
I think so.
We have not.
I didn't think so. And I think that they would deserve to be dropped down a couple more spots on my rankings after the trade just a little while ago. And because of that trade, I think it's a really good time to talk about them. So, yeah, I'd have them as at 18th, and I'd probably push them down a few more spots. Wait. Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, at this point, it's, I mean, quarterback by committee with two options in Haskins and Bridgewater. He's got Barkley, which is great, but no other running back. He's got Diggs, which should be great. No other receivers. He's got Hunter Henry. Nothing else on offense. So he's got, on week to week, he's got 4 offensive starters that are going to put up reasonable points. That's it. He's going to take zeros or close to it at those other positions. And then, I mean, defensively, he's not bad. Like, D tackle's okay. His defensive end, he should be able to, cobble together pretty good weeks with Ngakoue and Lawson. Linebackers, he's got some depth, but nothing too sexy. I mean, he just picked up Milano, and Milano's fine, but that ain't sexy. I mean, there's no depth on offense, and that's, especially in the NFC, is going to crush him in so many matchups.
Yeah, I think he's got depth in the wrong places on defense. I think he's got studs, but not depth on offense. I had this team a lot higher before the Henry trade.
Yeah.
And I don't think Milano and 2 late firsts fill the gaps he has.
No. Having
this year.
Barkley and Henry there just to like stabilize, like going into the season, you're going to be getting an X amount of points per week from those two every single week, which stabilized the issue he had at offense, which was he had 4 dudes on offense and then a question mark at QB. And then he was going to be taking zeros or close to it unless he just used all of his picks on wide receivers and running backs. But
those
now
picks aren't going to
he's
get you anybody at receiver or running back. Like,
No.
realistically, who are you taking there?
well,
So-
actually,
For
And the
argument's
picks
sake.
that he has
Yeah.
that are late first, the 3 late first that he has, are best served on some
So
high-end defensive
124
players,
is his
which doesn't need.
first. So arguably, Judy, Lamb, Ruggs, Rager, Jefferson, Mims, Ayuk, Higgins, Edwards, all gone.
last year he would have had choice starting with Andy Isabella, Hakeem Butler, Deontay Johnson, who scored 172 points this year, Miles Boykin was only 58.
Drop back a little later
but-
and go Terry McLaurin.
yeah, Terry McLaurin. Like it's
And there are people there that can hit, but I mean, for the most part, those late firsts are great to have when you want to stack up at some of the high end defensive players at some positions, and that's not where he needs players.
Right.
I'm having a hard time figuring out the direction that he's trying to take this team in because he makes the big deal for Barkley. He makes a deal to get Hunter Henry, but then he sells Derrick Henry. Doesn't have enough players on offense, so he's acquiring some pieces that I feel like he's acquiring because he feels like he can be competitive, but then selling other pieces that are making he's just not sure what the goal is here.
Yeah, it's an interesting. Like, obviously, in a vacuum, hearing somebody trade Derrick Henry for 2 firsts is great until they're 2 late firsts and it's a 32-team NFL copy league, and like it gets worse. The picks aren't going to be terrible, but the issue I see with picks is more having to do with like how well is Redskins going to scout and pick players with that? Because there are going to be players there that score really, really well, but it's a matter of him identifying them and picking them, which is a hell of a lot harder than seeing I have Derrick Henry for the 8 whatever million for the rest of his career. I should just hold him.
That being said, he has been very open about wanting to sell Henry.
Yeah.
And apparently, nobody else was making an interesting offer for him.
2 first was the price tag. I've known that because I've talked with him about Derrick Henry for like 2 years now, and it was 2 first was the price tag.
Did you know that they were going to be 2 late firsts?
I didn't ever have 2 firsts to offer, so I don't know what the firsts needed to be.
Again, another player I had inquired around even earlier today, but we were just too far apart on some of the ancillary pieces.
With all your picks, all your firsts, you couldn't come up with a better first than
Does Mike need to trade
124 and 127?
Good.
I'm not trying to add Derrick Henry to my roster. If I have to pay 119 or better for him,
That's the point where it's diminishing returns.
so either way, I think it helps Goose a lot. Like it gives him stability and
That's a
kind of
great
his
trade for
best
him.
ball approach for other positions.
When was the
Um,
last time Goose made a bad trade?
I didn't like his first for Van Noy,
So what does this turn?
which he pointed out to me earlier today.
Actually, a bit off topic and just kind of a good topic to close out on. If we look at the transactions, what does this turn Daniel Jones into officially?
Ooh. This
So
is the end of the Daniel Jones line of
Daniel Jones, Billings, and Akella Witherspoon came back 121 and Tampa's first.
Speaking of Goose, if you're listening to this, I would like to collect on my payment for guiding you to signing Akello and being able to flip him to somebody. You are very much welcome.
So let's see. The pieces he got back.
He doesn't need your help, Matt.
The pieces he got back in the deal for Daniel Jones basically went to get Cam Jordan, Derrick Henry. Did he move 121 yet, or does he still have that?
He still has it.
Still has 121. So 121, Derrick Henry, and Cameron Jordan for Daniel Jones. I'm sorry, and Andrew Billings and Akella Witherspoon.
I think the
I mean, I
real
like it for his roster.
Yeah, I think the real snatch of Goose's the last 3 Goose trades have just been ridiculous.
All right. Well, that said, we got through our 10 teams, and we'll finish off with our top 12 next week. Let me see. Actually, just a quick poll of the audience. What's the lowest ranked team you still have? Not name of team, but in terms of rank. Brett.
Lions. Sorry, not by team. I wasn't listening.
Lions.
Did you? No.
So we talked about that, but rank in terms of number.
The lowest team that I have left that we haven't talked about. I don't know. I have no idea. Give me a sec. Matt, you go.
Mine's probably the Steelers. Because I think we've covered everyone in the East in the NFC, haven't we? Except for the Giants. Was it Eagles? We haven't covered Eagles.
I think Eagles is mine. Yeah.
Yeah, it's probably Eagles or Steelers, and I think it might be Eagles just because he's actively trying to tear down his roster.
So in terms of rank, not in
14.
terms of actual team. Never mind. This is
14.
almost as bad as my Scrubs joke.
14.
I mean, I've got my 19th ranked team still not talking about.
Oof.
What I was trying to get to.
Oof.
Oh,
Anyways, we'll go through our top
Well,
12. You know,
Is
spit
it
it out.
is it Vikings?
we'll go through our top 12 next time. And again, I'm kind of shocked I haven't been talked about yet. But anyways, appreciate you both being on. Brett, any
You always
final words?
underestimate yourself. No, thanks for having me. It's been fun.
Cool. Matt?
Toodles.
All right. Sorry we're a little over an hour this time, but hope you guys enjoyed it. Take care.